It's hardly surprising, if I can just focus on what I feel quite strongly about today, that that students' union sounded so political, because at the heart of this, as we discussed with Professor Janssen, is a political issue. In many respects, various representatives of and student leaders continue to hark back to the demands, or at the very least, the promises of 1994, which never needed to be made in that way, in that first place, of free education, and are not providing a very clear economic solution to what is ultimately a political problem. And that problem, of course, is one of creating expectation that can probably never be met. A cursory look at our expenses and our estimates of national expenditure will indicate to us that there has been a perennial and annual reduction in the overall contribution from the national budget and the national fiscus to higher education and learning. And this has happened at the same time as there's been greater and greater emphasis from a political rhetoric perspective on students to simply pull themselves up by either their bootstraps, entrepreneurship, which is increasingly filled with red tape, or somehow find themselves in high-paying roles simply by getting a university degree. Life experience will show that that's not necessarily going to be the outcome, that internships may abound, that complexity may happen from industry to industry, and that the straight line, while I hear our distinguished professor saying that in a large number of students, or at least graduates, do get hired, the straight line between that graduation day and that employment isn't necessarily as firm as it used to be at the outset, for example, of the century. And so I think unless this is something that gets taken back to Tito Mbowene's office and the National Treasury, as the professor suggests, and turned completely on its head from the annual attrition of budget provided for education to a different focus of what that budget should actually entail. Not just an increase towards higher education and learning and training, but also a different emphasis as to how those academic institutions actually look and what kind of experience comes from those. Unless that gets turned on its head in its entirety, this will just be a political exercise that, unfortunately, regardless of the fact that student leaders want no political parties to jump on board, will most likely be exploited, particularly in an election year.